Asger, it's really, really nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you are Group CTO, Chief Architect of Area9 Lyceum. I'm super intrigued with what Area9 Lyceum is doing, especially with being the world's most advanced four-dimensional and AI adaptive learning company.
So yes, we are doing adaptive e-learning. And the way to think about that is to imagine that you have a very patient teacher along your side that will guide you through the material, personalizing it for you, focusing on your strong parts and your weak parts, and just helping you succeed.
And is that targeted at any particular demographic?
It works for a lot of different groups of people. So we are working in the K-12 space, in high schools, colleges, and obviously also in different companies and organizations.
What was the precursor to adaptive e-learning?
E-learning has developed over the last 20 years, and we've seen that personalization really makes a big difference. And I think that you can see e-learning evolving from delivering the same thing to everybody to becoming more personalized and adapting to your specific needs. There have been a number of systems throughout the years that have done that, but I think it's very clear that this is the way to go. And I would point to one reason. It's that you can see how long it takes to complete a course. So when we look at the data, we have millions of users. We can see the quickest they do it that fast, and then there are some that need more time. And it's not a problem that you're slow, that's fine. It just has to be the right speed for you. So if you look at, for instance, Einstein, he was a slow learner, but I don't think we can have a debate about whether he knew what he was doing.
And how has last year impacted what you've been doing in adaptive learning?
It has impacted us in a number of different ways, in the sense that we can see that we can maybe bring this technology to a broad audience. One of the limiting factors of adaptive e-learning is that it's expensive to construct, because you have to be very meticulous about all the details in it. And there's a process that we follow that we've developed over the years that's very labor intensive, because you need to have very high quality items that are very precise and reliable. With these new AI technologies, we can develop that content in a draft form quicker, so that the learning engineers that do the work, they get a head start.
And how has it affected your learning engineers in terms of shifting from what they did to now using maybe prompt engineering in order to prompt the system to provide the content that you want?
It's a change that takes some time to get used to, because we come from a world where we have a very predictable process, that we knew all the different steps that has to be done, to a new world where there is uncertainty. We don't know exactly what to do and how to get the best results, and people are learning to be more agile and adaptive and interact with the system in a new way.
What an amazing, interesting time to be around in that type of a role. And I'm really glad that we could have this chat about sort of what's going on in the world. Gartner said that by 2025, GenAI will account for 10% of all the data that's produced. That's from 1% today. So really crazy growth from a data production. And in 2021, the AI market was valued at approximately $60 billion. By 2028, it's expected to be $430 billion. Phenomenal growth, and this is according to Zion Market Research. And then Gartner forecasts that AI services will be the dominant growth driver for IT services, which is one of the industries in which we operate as Hitachi. And with the AI market for IT services is expected to go to almost $440 billion by 2027. Now, also interestingly, Forbes said that globally, AI companies have raised over $300 billion in funding. And so far, much of the AI investments have been in foundational models. So Asger, so there's a ton going on. In your role at Area9 Lyceum, I'd love to hear more about your perspective on all of the craziness that's going on.
We could see that AI was developing. There was a revolution when these deep neural networks started to show that they could solve stuff other techniques couldn't. And it was clear that it was developing fast for a number of reasons. So obviously hardware improved. It's fair to say that there's a factor of 10 increase in performance every year in the last 10 years. And that's a huge driver for being able to train bigger and bigger models. And on top of that, you have a lot of data that you can train your algorithms on. And the third part is obviously new architectures, new algorithms, new improvements from theory.
Yeah.
And all of that has come together in especially the large language models, the GPTs we've seen. And it was clear to me when GPT-3 came out that this was going to be a big change.
Yeah.
At that point, it couldn't do the things they can do today, but based on the emergence of new capabilities that turned up, I had no doubt that this would develop.
I remember, Asger, when you reached out and said, hey, you should check out GPT-3 when it came out. But what was it about that like got you guys so excited, especially coming from the learning platform side? When you saw that, like what triggered the intrigue and the interest that then let you begin to work on it already? Like, you guys have been working on this long before 3.5 came out.
It was a couple of different things. First of all, obviously it was very competent in language. Just being able to understand syntax and grammar and being able to write coherently, that was the first time we've seen that, and that was a breakthrough. Obviously it didn't have the reasoning capabilities that GPT-4 in particular has, but it could solve some problems in language that were unsolvable before. And I think to us it demonstrated that the competencies were climbing. So just the improvement from 2 to 3, and if you progress that, you could clearly predict that something special would be happening.
In the context of adaptive learning, and you guys were pioneers in this space, how did you think about applying then GPT-3 pre-3.5?
So we knew that 3 wasn't sufficient to be able to be used directly, but we knew that there would be a model that would be useful. So we prepared. So what we did is that we said, okay, let's assume that there was going to be a 4 one day, and that it can do some of these things we needed to do inside our space. What are the key ingredients we need to be able to pick that up quickly? So we designed the technical architecture for how to be ready for that, made different programming languages that could be used for that, and just tried to make out what would the best way to use them be when the capabilities were there.
I guess you can't really have any conversation without some discussion about ChatGPT. There's also many enterprises, us included, where we are all building out our own versions, our own LLMs or foundational models, or looking for ways in which we could embrace it and apply it for our business. How would you advise a company, an enterprise that's approaching this?
It's a good idea to get started with these technologies. And I think it depends on what company you are and what function you are, how you want to use it. It does have very broad applicability. And obviously there are some very common things like getting your knowledge base in there so you can interact with that and get answers to your questions in a quicker way. I think most companies will be able to use it like that. Programming, obviously, if you have programmers, they're probably already using it because it can help you code. But it can also help you do analysis and synthesis of different information. There are just so many different things that you can use with these things. Generate content, obviously, is a big part. So there are different buckets, and depending on what your needs are in the business, I think you need to look at it and figure out how to embrace it.
The 3 big use cases that have jumped out are all C's, right? Content, customer service, code generation, right? And those are your internal enterprise use cases. You didn't think about applying it internally, right? You thought about how do I take the product you have and make your product that much more unique. As we are applying it internally, are there mechanisms to consider to think about how do you apply it externally? How do you bring that as a product or a service to your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that the key point is to figure out what is quality. If you know what quality is in your domain, that's where you start. And the thing about these models is that you don't need to be a technical person to use them. If you know how to ask the right questions, if you learn about prompt engineering, if you learn of some of these disciplines and can judge quality, I think that's the starting point. So I don't think the elements themselves will be the product that you maybe give to your customers, but they can help you develop new products or services.
Gartner said by 2028, 50% of the companies that are building some sort of a foundational model or investing in LLMs will scrap it because of cost, quality.
I think that's fair. At the end of the day, it's a lot of people are making their own models. There are literally hundreds of them. But there are very few that has the peak quality. And I think the point is, if you have a model like GPT-4, which currently is the best one, and you compare it to the other ones, it's just smarter. And if you need to solve a problem, you want the smartest one. So if you can't build a model that's as smart, you will have a disadvantage. So obviously there are reasons why you want to build your own if you're concerned about data leaks and stuff like that. I know there are reasons to do it, but ultimately, at this point, you still want to have the smartest model.
Let's touch on that a little bit, Asger. Privacy or proprietary data is one of the big things that companies say. let's build our own model for that reason. What are you using?
We're using GPT-4 from OpenAI.
And do you not have privacy concerns or concerns around your proprietary data leaking?
No, because the way we use it is to generate things. So we don't send our data to it. We're using it to generate content. So that's a different use case.
Is it a valid concern to worry about proprietary data when you're sharing it with either an open model or even a closed model, but with a third party?
Obviously, it depends on the needs for control. I would say that today it's common to trust the cloud providers. Mm-hmm. You send your data to the cloud, and that's okay. I think this is similar in some sense. You can always base it on an open model. You can base it on that pretty safely because they listed exactly what went into it, how it was built. Yep. You can vet that, and you can deploy that in your own infrastructure.
Okay.
So there are ways where you can do a mix.
Yeah. And do you think hybrid models are probably the direction where we're headed, or federated models of some sort?
I think that we'll see what happens, but I think that all the big companies that are building these models, they do know that this is a concern, and they're coming up with offerings that will satisfy.
Yeah. Is there a certain scale of enterprise that requires it or should be thinking about it versus is it a type of work they do? Is it the type of industry you're in? And any thoughts around that?
Well, I would first look at, can you use one of the existing models? Can you find terms and conditions and regulation around it that suit you? Because this field is developing so fast that even if you start to build your own model, it's probably going to be obsolete when it comes out. Yeah. Unless you really invest a lot in it at the scale where you compete with others. And that's going to be hard because you can't get the hardware to do it.
From a Hitachi perspective, we have so many industries in which we operate, and each industry is unique unto itself. And so within the context of our industries, whether it be rail or energy, we do have very specific information, maintenance, design, changes that you can build. So we have a ton of proprietary data. And so one of our biggest concerns is how can we apply that proprietary data for our own business and for our own business model and to digitize these businesses. We are certainly looking at building our own models, but then we are also in the conversation of trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, to the point you just made, which is if we were to build our own model, how do we ensure that it doesn't become obsolete by the time it gets launched, right? So any advice on how to think that through?
Sure. So you can do fine-tuning, and I think that makes a lot of sense, where you take an existing base model and you train it with your own data to get it to understand that part. There are APIs that allow you to do it, but you can also do that using the open source models where you have complete control over what you're doing. I think the need for this will decrease over time as these models will be able to get a bigger context window, meaning how much it can read. At some point, it will be able to read all of your material inside the prompt. So you don't even need to fine-tune it anymore. This is developing in that direction that you will just teach it what you needed on demand, and then it can answer your queries.
So, Asger, switching topics, copilots, the 4 C's. There's copilots, code generation, which you could argue is a copilot. There's content, and then there's customer service, right? Most organizations are enabling and using these. And in my mind, somewhat naively, I was thinking each function from the front office to the back office or the value chain would have its own co-pilot, and each leader or individual within an organization could engage with it, access the data, interpret, use it, analyze it, and drive greater value for the organization or for their customers. As I was going down this path, and I think there's many organizations that are doing it, I met with this company last week who have basically turned that on its head. Basically, they've integrated everything. The entire back office is now integrated into their own language model. And then there is an interface that they've built on top of that, which now allows you to basically query anything. Anyone can query anything within an organization, almost sort of leading to this concept of organizational intelligence. That is a whole nother level to what I was thinking about in terms of copilots. What do you think about this?
I think that it's true that these models are generalist models.
Yeah.
I think that we can see that they know basically everything at some level because they've studied everything we know. It's interesting that there is this debate about specialist models against generalist models. And I think so far it's fair to say that specialist models can be trained to become better at specific things, and that's valuable in many cases. But the generalist models are more robust in some sense because they just know more general stuff. And it turns out there are synergies between different areas.
One of the examples I saw was the query was about an invoice, the contract, the KPIs, and whether they all matched up to the payment that needed to be made. And then within that, where are we with the payment, right? If it was stuck, where is it stuck? Querying that, being able to go directly to the person who was handling it, and then querying there and then getting the answer that you want, which normally in an organization, finance got the invoice, they went to legal, validating it, went to the business unit to make sure that the KPIs were in place and that they met the expectations. All of that in one keystroke. As you start to extrapolate from that, my culture could be in here, my organization, I could get my org diagrams, I don't need to ask anybody for it. I sort of walked away from it going, were we limited in the way we were thinking about it?
That's a thing I also experienced. It's like when you start to interact with these models, the first time you try to, looking back at it, it's a kind of softball question that it just mastered. And then you increase your courage and ask it bigger and bigger thing. And then you realize, wow, really it's only your own imagination that's the limit here.
That's really, really cool. It leads me to this question, Asger. Does this level of intelligence make us more intelligent or less?
I think it makes us more intelligent.
As humans, are we doing less work? Is our brain getting less exercise?
I think we're doing different work. So I think what we're doing is we are more accessing our critical reasoning abilities. We're looking at the response and seeing, is this what I want? What is it I want to change? So judging more than you're creating. But I think that's still a human specialty. We can sense very fine details and judge these things. And I think that's still going to be relevant.
For how long?
We can ask a philosophical question like that. When they're smarter than us, then what? I'm not too worried about that. I think if you look at games, for instance, chess, Kasparov, he lost to Deep Blue a long time ago. Since then, computers have been better at chess than humans. Even Magnus Carlsen, he cannot beat a computer today. It's too strong. But we still enjoy watching people play chess.
There's a huge productivity gain, but then it keeps bugging me that is it going to make the next generations do less work, or is it going to make them suddenly learn differently?
Well, I think we have to be a little bit realistic here. Look at what's happening in schools today. A lot of kids, they don't really learn that much compared to what we wished would happen. So already today we have a big problem in education. And I think this technology can help with that, because it is realistic that you can get help and you can get material that interests you, and you can pursue something that is more in line with what you want to spend your time on as a kid. From that perspective, there is an opportunity to use it for good, for education, and to raise the level. And I also think that it's a chance to raise the bar, so because you're right, that you can get it to do your homework, but maybe we should make the assignments more difficult.
More difficult, That's
and
fair.
then allow it to be used, and then just declare how you used it. So if we make an exercise like that, you say you can use it all you want, but you have to give in the prompts that you used, and you have to own the result.
So show your homework.
Show your homework, and own the result. You have to be able to come up and communicate it, defend it. If you can do that, I think that's a productive
Actually, I like that. You're right. Even when the calculators came out, we were asked to show the workings. So you knew what you were doing, but then you can use the calculator to get to the answer. Hey, so regulation.
Yes.
There's a lot of countries with their own approaches to it. What's your take on regulation and what's going on right now? And can it be regulated?
I think it can be regulated. I think that maybe it cannot be globally regulated, but regionally you can definitely regulate it. And I think we're going to see that's happening. At least in the EU, we have the AI Act that is being rolled out, and it tries to regulate these areas. And I think it's fair. I think there are real risks with these models, and you need to be careful that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot.
There's been, certainly in the US, talk about regulation helping the leaders and stifling the startup ecosystem, because the leaders have already established themselves and now they want regulation so that it slows down the rest of the innovation that could occur. What do you think about that?
I think that that's maybe right. I think it's easier for a big company to live up to formal requirements than a small startup. And I think it also points to another thing, is that the regulation right now is a bunch of stuff you're not allowed to do. It's not about encouraging what you want to use these models for. So I think it would be great if regulation also came with incentives that says, we want to promote humanity, we want to promote climate, whatever things you want to promote as a society, give an incentive to use these technologies in that direction. That could be a way to allow startups and others to contribute as well.
So make regulation not to be punitive, but actually both punitive and positive. So you want to encourage the things that you want to see coming out of it. So as a CTO, chief architect, leading adaptive learning, fourth generation learning platform, what advice would you give another CTO or a CEO that's about to embark on the same journey?
You need to make a strategy to try to adopt this in different parts of the organization. And I think one of the things I've found is that it's hard to predict who will be good at it. So my advice is that offer it to everyone in the sense that they can try it out, give them training and prompt engineering, and then see who emerges as naturals in that picture. It's just some people get it quicker than others, but I think the key point I just want to reiterate is that they need to know what good quality is. So if that's a key prerequisite.
Terrific. Asger, loved having you here, loved talking to you, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Enjoyed it.